Sarah Martinez stepped off the bus at Naval Base Coronado, her worn sneakers hitting the asphalt with a quiet thud. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training facility, and the salty Pacific breeze carried the distant sound of commands being barked at recruits. She clutched a manila folder containing her temporary work authorization. Feeling completely out of place among the uniformed personnel marching with purpose around the base at 28. Sarah had never imagined she would find herself here. Just 6 months ago, she was working double shifts at a downtown San Diego diner, saving every penny to support her younger brother's college education after their parents died in a car accident. The stack of unpaid medical bills from her mother's cancer treatment still sat on her kitchen table. A constant reminder of how quickly life could change, the job posting had appeared on an obscure government contractor website. Administrative support for physical training documentation. Minimum security clearance required. The pay was decent and, most importantly, it offered health insurance. Sarah had applied without really understanding what the position entailed. Desperate for stable income and benefits, Commander Jake Harrison watched from his office window as the new civilian contractor approached the main building. He had fought against hiring outside help for months, but budget cuts meant they needed someone to handle the mountains of paperwork generated by the SEAL training programs. The Navy's elite warriors shouldn't waste time on administrative tasks, his superiors argued. Harrison grudgingly agreed, though he remained skeptical about bringing a civilian into their world. Sarah's supervisor, Lieutenant Miller, was a kind man in his 40s who took pity on her obvious nervousness. He showed her to a cramped office filled with filing cabinets and explained her duties: organizing training records, inputting data about physical fitness tests, and maintaining documentation for the various specialized programs run at the facility. "You'll be working mostly with historical records," Miller explained, gesturing to towers of boxes. "Some of this stuff goes back decades. We're trying to digitize everything for better record keeping." As weeks passed, Sarah fell into a routine. She arrived early, worked methodically through the files, and left quietly each evening. The SEALs barely acknowledged her presence, which suited her fine. She was there to work, not to make friends or prove anything to anyone, but as she organized the records, Sarah became fascinated by what she read. Training logs detailed incredible feats of endurance and strength. Mission reports spoke of courage and teamwork under impossible circumstances. Physical fitness standards that seemed almost superhuman. She found herself staying late, reading about swimming times, running records, and obstacle course completions that pushed the boundaries of human capability. One evening, while organizing files from the 1990s, Sarah discovered records of a legendary training exercise known as Hell Week Plus. It was an unofficial challenge that had been discontinued after several hospitalizations. The records showed that in 2014, a class of SEALs had set what became known as the Ironman record, a combination of swimming, running, obstacle courses, and endurance challenges. Completed over 5 consecutive days with minimal sleep and food, the record holder was listed as Team Alpha 7, with a completion time of 127 hours and 43 minutes. For a decade, no team had come close to breaking it. Sarah stared at the faded documents, trying to imagine the physical and mental strength required for such an achievement. What she didn't notice was that her own habits were changing. The long hours of sitting and organizing files had initially made her feel sluggish and tired. To combat this, she started taking walks during her lunch breaks. The walks became jogs around the base perimeter. The jogs became runs. Growing up, Sarah had been athletic. She ran track in high school before family responsibilities forced her to abandon college plans and work full-time. Her body remembered the rhythm of running, the satisfying burn of muscles working hard, the clarity that came with physical exertion. For the first time in years, she felt connected to something beyond survival and obligation. Lieutenant Miller began noticing that Sarah often arrived at work with damp hair and flushed cheeks. She mentioned casually that she had started swimming at the public pool before work. Swimming led to curiosity about the base's fitness facilities. With Miller's help, she obtained permission to use the gym during off hours. When the SEALs weren't training, Commander Harrison, despite his initial reservations about civilian contractors, had developed respect for Sarah's work ethic. She was efficient, reliable, and importantly, she kept to herself. He approved her gym access without much thought, assuming she might use the treadmill occasionally. None of them could have predicted what would happen next. Sarah's transformation was gradual but profound. The physical activity became an outlet for years of suppressed stress and grief. Each mile she ran carried away some of the weight of responsibility she had carried since her parents' death. Each length she swam in the pool washed away a little more of the helplessness she felt watching her mother's illness progress. She wasn't trying to prove anything, or compete with anyone. She was simply rediscovering a part of herself that had been buried under years of financial struggle and family crisis. But as her strength and endurance improved, she found herself comparing her times to the standards she had read about in the SEAL training records. The base operated on a strict schedule, and Sarah learned to time her workouts to avoid the elite trainees. She preferred the solitude anyway, using the time to think and plan for her brother's upcoming graduation. He had no idea how much she had sacrificed to keep him in school, and she intended to keep it that way. One morning, arriving earlier than usual due to insomnia, Sarah discovered she wasn't alone in the gym. A group of SEALs was conducting an informal fitness test, timing each other on various exercises. She tried to slip out unnoticed, but the sound of the door caught their attention. "Sorry," she mumbled, backing toward the exit. "I didn't know anyone was using the facility." "It's fine," called one of the men, a tall blonde she recognized as Petty Officer Davis. "You're the new admin, right? Miller's been talking about how organized you are." Sarah nodded, still planning her escape, but something in the friendly tone of the group made her pause. For months she had existed on the periphery of this world, reading about their achievements and standards without ever imagining herself as part of it. That hesitation would change everything. Petty Officer Davis noticed Sarah's running shoes and workout clothes. "You train here regularly?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Just early mornings, before work starts," Sarah replied, still feeling like an intruder despite having permission to be there. "What's your mile time?" Another SEAL, Rodriguez, asked casually while adjusting weights on a barbell. Sarah hesitated. She had been tracking her progress in a small notebook, partly out of habit and partly because seeing improvement motivated her to continue. "Around 6 minutes, 40 seconds, she said quietly. The room fell silent. Davis and Rodriguez exchanged glances. A sub-7-minute mile was respectable for anyone, but particularly impressive for someone who wasn't part of an official training program. "That's solid," Davis said. "You swim too?" "Some," Sarah admitted. "I use the pool before the official training hours." Rodriguez grinned. "She's being modest. I've seen her doing laps at 05:00. Looked like she was training for the Olympics." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. She hadn't realized anyone was paying attention to her routine. "I should get to work," she said, moving toward the door. "Wait," Davis called. "We're running an informal fitness assessment this morning. Nothing official, just seeing where we stand individually. Want to join us?" The invitation caught Sarah completely off guard. These men were among the most elite athletes in the world, and they were asking her to participate in their training? "I don't think that's appropriate," she said. "I'm just administrative support." "Fitness doesn't have a job description," Rodriguez said with a shrug. "Besides, we could use the motivation. Competition makes everyone better." Something in Sarah stirred at the word competition. It had been years since she felt challenged by anything other than financial survival. The idea of pushing herself against a real standard, rather than just personal improvement, awakened something she thought she had lost forever. "What kind of assessment?" she asked, surprising herself. Davis outlined the morning's plan, a 2-mile run, followed by swimming laps, then basic obstacle course elements. Nothing too intense, just baseline measurements. "We do this monthly to track our conditioning between official evaluations." Sarah looked at her watch. She had arrived at the gym an hour earlier than usual, which gave her time before her regular work schedule began. I suppose I could participate, she said, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. The run began at dawn along the base perimeter. Sarah fell into pace with the group, focusing on maintaining steady breathing and consistent form. She had been running this route alone for months, but everything felt different with companions. The SEALs chatted casually as they ran, discussing weekend plans and giving each other grief about various topics. Their easy camaraderie made Sarah realize how isolated she had become since her parents' death. By the 1-mile mark, Sarah was still keeping pace with the middle of the group. She wasn't pushing hard, simply maintaining the rhythm that felt natural to her. Several of the SEALs had pulled ahead, but she wasn't falling behind either. "You doing okay?" Davis asked, running beside her. "Fine," Sarah replied, and meant it. She felt strong and controlled, like she could maintain this pace indefinitely. The second mile revealed more about her conditioning. While some of the SEALs began to show signs of fatigue, Sarah felt increasingly comfortable. Her breathing remained steady, her stride stayed consistent, and her mind was clear. When they reached the finish line, she checked her watch. 12 minutes, 58 seconds for the 2-mile run. "Damn," Rodriguez panted, hands on his knees. Where did that come from? Sarah was puzzled by their reaction until she looked at the other times. She had finished third overall out of 8 participants, behind only 2 SEALs who were known for their exceptional running ability. "Beginner's luck," she said, though she felt anything but lucky. She felt alive in a way she hadn't experienced in years. The swimming portion took place in the base pool, a regulation Olympic-sized facility. Sarah had been swimming laps here for weeks, but always alone and without timing herself precisely. The assessment called for a 500-meter freestyle swim for time as they prepared to enter the water. Sarah noticed the SEALs studying her with new interest. Her running performance had clearly surprised them, and they were curious to see if it translated to other activities. The swim began with all participants diving in simultaneously. Sarah had learned to swim as a child and rediscovered her technique during recent morning sessions. She focused on efficiency rather than speed, maintaining long, smooth strokes and bilateral breathing. Halfway through the swim, Sarah realized she was leading. The pool's lane lines created individual channels, so she couldn't see the other swimmers clearly, but she was consistently gaining on the wall at each turn. The rhythmic nature of swimming allowed her mind to enter a meditative state, where stroke count and breathing became automatic. She touched the wall at the 500-meter mark and immediately looked for her time, 7 minutes, 12 seconds. Around her, the other swimmers were finishing within the next 30 seconds, but several were breathing hard and showing signs of fatigue. "That was your first time 500?" Davis asked incredulously. Sarah nodded, toweling off her hair. She felt energized rather than tired, like the swim had awakened every muscle in her body. The obstacle course portion consisted of basic elements: rope climbing, wall scaling, balance beams, and crawling sections. These were skills Sarah had never practiced, unlike running and swimming, which built on abilities she had developed years earlier. She approached each obstacle methodically, watching how the SEALs navigated them and adapting their techniques to her own capabilities. Her lack of experience showed, but her fundamental fitness allowed her to complete everything without major difficulty. More importantly, she discovered that she enjoyed problem-solving with her body. Each obstacle presented a physical puzzle that required strength, balance, and technique. When she failed at something, like her first attempt at rope climbing, she analyzed what went wrong and adjusted her approach. By the end of the morning, Sarah had completed every element of the assessment. Her times weren't record-breaking in every category, but her overall performance was remarkable for someone with no formal military training. As the group dispersed to shower and report for official duties, Rodriguez approached Sarah with a serious expression. "You know that monthly assessment we just did?" he said. Sarah nodded. "Those times you just posted? They're better than some of our official scores?" Sarah wasn't sure how to respond to that information. She had participated out of curiosity and found herself enjoying the challenge, but she hadn't considered her performance in relation to military standards. "There's something else you should know," Rodriguez continued. Commander Harrison has been talking about reinstating some of the old school challenges. Team building exercises that haven't been done in years because they're considered too demanding. He paused, studying her reaction. After this morning, I think you should know what you're capable of. Because if the commander goes ahead with his plans, you might want to consider joining us. Word of Sarah's performance spread through the base faster than she expected. By afternoon, she noticed SEALs nodding to her in the hallways, a recognition she had never received before. Lieutenant Miller mentioned that Commander Harrison wanted to see her, though he didn't explain why. Sarah knocked on Harrison's office door that evening, her stomach tight with anxiety. She assumed someone had complained about her participating in the morning's assessment, crossing boundaries between civilian contractors and military personnel. "Come in." Harrison's voice called from behind the heavy wooden door. Commander Harrison was an intimidating figure even seated behind his desk. Gray-haired and weathered, with the bearing of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions, he studied Sarah with intense blue eyes. "Sit down, Martinez," he said. Gesturing to a chair across from his desk, Sarah sat carefully, hands folded in her lap, prepared for a reprimand. "I hear you had an interesting morning," Harrison began, consulting a file that Sarah realized contained information about her performance. "Sir, if I overstepped any boundaries, I apologize. Petty Officer Davis invited me to participate, and I thought it was appropriate since I had permission to use the facilities." Harrison held up a hand to stop her explanation. "You're not in trouble. But I am curious about your background. Your personnel file shows you worked in food service before this position. No military experience, no formal athletic training." "That's correct, sir." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Then explain to May how a civilian contractor just posted times that would qualify for advanced SEAL training programs." Sarah didn't know how to answer that question. She had been asking herself the same thing since the morning's assessment. "I've always been physically active," she said finally. "I ran track in high school, but that was years ago." "Your 2-mile time this morning was faster than 60% of my active personnel," Harrison said bluntly. "Your swimming time would rank in the top 15%. And according to Davis, you completed obstacle elements you'd never attempted before." He opened another folder on his desk. "I've been reviewing historical training records, looking for ways to improve our current programs. There's a challenge that hasn't been attempted in over a decade because it was deemed too demanding. But recent budget discussions have my superiors asking questions about training efficiency and personnel capabilities." Harrison stood and walked to the window overlooking the training facilities. "The challenge is called Operation Ironman. It was originally designed to test the absolute limits of SEAL conditioning. 5 days of continuous physical and mental challenges with minimal rest and nutrition. The last team to complete it set a record that stood for 10 years. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. She had read about Operation Ironman in the historical files, though the records had been incomplete. "I've seen references to that in the archives," she said. "What you probably haven't seen are the detailed requirements," Harrison continued. "It's not just about individual fitness. It requires teamwork, strategy, problem-solving under extreme fatigue, and the ability to support teammates when everything in your body is telling you to quit." He turned back to face her. "I'm considering reinstating the challenge with modifications to meet current safety standards. But I need to know my personnel are capable of attempting it without risking lives or careers." Sarah waited, unsure where this conversation was leading. "Your performance this morning suggests you might have the physical capability to participate in such a challenge," Harrison said. "But more importantly, your background suggests you understand something about enduring hardship that can't be taught in training." The reference to her background caught Sarah off guard. She wondered how much Commander Harrison knew about her. Personal circumstances, the years of struggle and sacrifice that had brought her to this position. "I'm not sure I understand what you're proposing, sir," she said carefully. Harrison returned to his desk and pulled out a thick manual. "I'm proposing that you consider joining a trial team for a modified version of Operation Ironman. Your participation would be voluntary and unofficial. If the trial is successful, it might lead to reinstating the challenge for active personnel. Sarah stared at the manual, trying to process what she was hearing. Sir, I'm a civilian contractor. I handle paperwork and filing. I'm not qualified for elite military challenges. Qualification isn't just about military training, Harrison said. It's about character, determination, and the ability to function under pressure. Your performance this morning demonstrated physical capability. Your work ethic over the past months has demonstrated reliability. And frankly, your life experience has demonstrated the kind of resilience we look for in our best personnel. He slid the manual across the desk toward her. This contains the historical records and requirements for Operation Iron Man. Take it home, read it, and think about whether you're interested in finding out what you're truly capable of. Sarah picked up the manual, surprised by its weight. What would participation involve exactly? 6 weeks of intensive preparation training with a select team. Then a 5-day challenge that would test every aspect of your physical and mental conditioning. If you complete it, you'd be helping to evaluate whether current SEAL Air SEAL training programs are producing personnel capable of meeting historical standards. Harrison's expression grew serious. I should be clear about what this means. The preparation would be demanding beyond anything you've experienced. The challenge itself would push you to your absolute limits. There's a real possibility of failure, and even completion would require sacrifices in terms of time, energy, and comfort. Sarah thought about her comfortable routine of work, gym sessions, and quiet evenings at home. Then she thought about the feelings she'd had that morning during the assessment, the sense of discovering capabilities she never knew existed. Why me? She asked. There must be dozens of active personnel who would be better candidates. Because, Harrison said, sometimes an outsider's perspective reveals what insiders take for granted. Your approach to this morning's challenges was different from what I typically see. You weren't trying to prove anything or compete with anyone. You were simply doing your best, and your best turned out to be exceptional. He stood, signaling that the meeting was concluding. Take a few days to think about it. Discuss it with your family if you need to. But understand that if you agree to participate, you'll be part of something that hasn't been attempted in a decade, with standards that have never been met by anyone outside the SEAL community. Sarah left Harrison's office with the manual under her arm and her mind racing. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table reading about Operation Iron Man while her brother, Marcus, called to update her about his final semester of college. You sound different, Marcus said near the end of their conversation. More energetic or something. Sarah smiled, thinking about the morning's assessment and Harrison's unexpected proposal. I might be starting a new project at work, she said, which was technically true. Cool, just don't work too hard. You've been carrying everyone else's weight for years. It's time you did something for yourself. After hanging up, Sarah continued reading the manual. The requirements were staggering: multi-day navigation challenges, underwater obstacle courses, endurance tests that lasted more than 24 hours, and team challenges that required absolute trust and coordination. But as she read, instead of feeling intimidated, she felt curious. Each challenge seemed like a problem to be solved, a question about her own capabilities that could only be answered through experience. By midnight, she had read the entire manual twice. By morning, she had made her decision. Sarah knocked on Commander Harrison's door early the next morning, the manual tucked under her arm and her decision made. I want to participate, she said without preamble when he invited her in. Harrison studied her face, looking for signs of doubt or hesitation. You understand what you're committing to? I understand it will be difficult, Sarah replied. I understand it will require dedication and sacrifice. What I don't understand is why passing up this opportunity would be better than trying and possibly failing. A slight smile crossed Harrison's face. Good answer. Training begins Monday at 05:00. You'll be working with a team of 3 SEALs who volunteered for this trial. They don't know about your participation yet. Will that be a problem? Sarah asked. That depends on you, Harrison said. They're expecting to work with someone who's earned the right to be there. Your job is to prove that you have. The weekend passed in a blur of nervous energy and preparation. Sarah researched nutrition strategies, sleep optimization, and recovery techniques. She also called her brother to let him know she might be less available for their usual conversations. "You're being mysterious," Marcus said. "What's this project really about?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "It's a physical challenge related to fitness standards. Think of it like training for a marathon, but more intensive." "Since when are you interested in fitness competitions?" "Since I discovered I might be good at them," Sarah said, surprising herself with the confidence in her voice. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with Pacific fog shrouding the training facilities. Sarah arrived at the designated meeting point at 0455. Wearing the workout clothes that had become her uniform and carrying a water bottle and towel, 3 SEALs were already waiting, and she recognized 2 of them from the morning assessment, Davis and Rodriguez. The third was someone she hadn't met, a compact man with dark hair and an expression that suggested he took everything seriously. "Gentlemen," Commander Harrison said, appearing from the direction of his office, "meet your teammate for the next 6 weeks. Sarah Martinez, civilian contractor and surprise physical specimen." The unknown SEAL, who introduced himself as Petty Officer Thompson, looked skeptical. "Sir, are we sure about including a civilian in this type of training?" "Thompson," Davis said quietly, "you should have seen her run last week." "I don't care if she can run," Thompson replied. "This isn't about individual performance. It's about functioning as a team under conditions that break people." Sarah felt the weight of his doubt, but also recognized the validity of his concern. These men had trained together for years, developing trust and communication that could mean the difference between success and failure in extreme situations. "Thompson's right," she said, addressing the group. "You don't know me, and you have no reason to trust that I won't become a liability when things get difficult. All I can ask is that you judge me based on performance, not assumptions." Harrison nodded approvingly. "The training schedule is in your packets. 6 weeks of progressive conditioning, team challenges, and skills development. Week 7 is the challenge itself." "Questions?" Thompson raised his hand. "What happens if someone can't keep up with the training progression?" "Then they're removed from the team," Harrison said bluntly. "This is voluntary, but once you commit, the standards are non-negotiable." The first week of training was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Each day began at 05:00 with a team run, followed by swimming, strength training, obstacle courses, and skills sessions that covered everything from navigation to rope techniques. The days typically lasted 12 hours, broken only by brief meals and equipment checks. Sarah discovered that her months of solitary training had prepared her physically but not mentally for the intensity of team-based challenges. Working with others required constant communication, situational awareness, and the ability to adapt her individual capabilities to support group objectives. Thompson remained skeptical but professional. He pushed everyone equally hard and never gave Sarah special consideration for being new to military-style training. Davis and Rodriguez were more encouraging, offering technique tips and explaining the reasoning behind different exercises. By the end of the first week, Sarah was exhausted but exhilarated. Every muscle in her body ached, but she had completed every requirement without falling behind the team's pace. More importantly, she was beginning to understand how individual strengths could combine to create collective capability. The second week introduced sleep deprivation training. The team operated on 4 hours of sleep per night while maintaining the same physical demands. Sarah learned that fatigue affected decision-making, reaction time, and emotional control in ways she hadn't anticipated. During a particularly challenging navigation exercise, conducted at night with minimal equipment, Sarah made a calculation error that led the team off course by several miles. Thompson's frustration was obvious, but instead of criticizing her, he worked with the team to correct the mistake and complete the objective. "Everyone makes mistakes when they're tired," he said afterward. "The difference between good teams and great teams is how quickly they recover and adapt." Sarah realized that Thompson's Earlier skepticism hadn't been about her personally, but about the integrity of the team dynamic. He needed to know that everyone, including her, could function under pressure without compromising the group's mission. The third week focused on water-based challenges, extended swimming exercises, underwater obstacle navigation, and scenarios that required the team to function in aquatic environments for hours at a time. Sarah's swimming background proved valuable, but she also learned that technique meant nothing without the ability to coordinate with teammates in challenging conditions. During one exercise, Rodriguez began showing signs of hypothermia during a cold water endurance challenge. Sarah and the others had to work together to support him while completing their objective, demonstrating that individual strength was meaningless without collective responsibility. Week 4 introduced equipment-based challenges. Carrying heavy loads over long distances, technical climbing with full gear, and scenarios that required the team to transport materials while maintaining operational speed. Sarah discovered that her smaller frame was sometimes an advantage, allowing her to navigate tight spaces and perform tasks that were difficult for larger team members. But she also learned about the psychological challenges of carrying weight beyond her normal capacity. The physical discomfort was manageable, but the constant pressure of knowing that falling behind would impact the entire team created mental stress she hadn't anticipated. Thompson's attitude toward Sarah began changing during week 4. After a particularly demanding load-carrying exercise, he approached her during a rest break. When Harrison first told us we'd be working with a civilian contractor, I thought it was going to be a publicity stunt, he said. And now? Sarah asked, curious about his assessment. Now, I think you might be tougher than some people I've served with, Thompson said. You don't quit when things get hard, and you don't make the same mistake twice. Week 5 was designed to simulate the mental challenges of extended operations. Complex problem-solving exercises while physically exhausted. Leadership rotation that required each team member to guide the others through different scenarios. And stress inoculation training that pushed everyone to their breaking points. Sarah found herself leading the team through a night navigation challenge when Davis became disoriented due to fatigue. Drawing on her months of studying base layouts and terrain maps as part of her administrative duties, she was able to guide them to their objective when the original plan fell apart. Where did that come from? Rodriguez asked afterward. I've been staring at maps of this base for months, Sarah replied. I never thought that knowledge would be useful for anything other than filing reports. By the end of week 5, the team had developed a kind of seamless coordination that Harrison had been looking for. Individual personalities and backgrounds had become less important than collective capability and shared trust. During their final preparation meeting, Harrison reviewed the challenge requirements with them one more time. Operation Ironman begins in 72 hours, he said. 5 days, minimal sleep, progressive physical and mental challenges designed to test your absolute limits. The current record is 127 hours and 43 minutes, set 10 years ago by Team Alpha 7. He looked at each team member individually. I want to be clear about expectations. Completion of this challenge would be an extraordinary achievement under any circumstances. Breaking the standing record would be unprecedented for a team with civilian participation. Sarah felt the weight of that statement. She had spent 6 weeks proving she belonged with these men, but the real test was about to begin. Operation Ironman began at 06:00 on a Tuesday morning with deceptively simple instructions. Report to the beach with basic gear and prepare for immediate deployment. Sarah arrived to find her teammates already assembled, their faces showing the same mixture of nervousness and determination she felt. Commander Harrison stood with a team of evaluators, clipboards, and timing equipment in hand. Gentlemen and Ms. Martinez, he began, the next 120 hours will test everything you've learned about yourselves and each other. There are no participation trophies, no partial credit, and no excuses. You complete every challenge within the time parameters, or you fail as a team. The first challenge was a 12-mile open water swim to San Clemente Island. followed immediately by a 15-mile run across the island's rugged terrain. The team would be evaluated on completion time, but more importantly, on their ability to arrive ready for the next phase. Without any member requiring medical assistance, Sarah slipped into the cold Pacific water alongside her teammates, feeling the familiar rhythm of swimming take over as they began the long journey to the island. The ocean was rougher than anything they had trained in, with swells that made navigation difficult and cross-currents that threatened to separate the team. 2 hours into the swim, Rodriguez began struggling with the conditions. The combination of cold water and challenging waves was affecting his stroke efficiency, and he was gradually falling behind the group's pace. Without discussion, Sarah and Davis moved to flank Rodriguez, creating a draft pocket that reduced his energy expenditure while maintaining the team's forward progress. Thompson adjusted the navigation to account for the modified formation, demonstrating the kind of adaptive thinking that separated elite teams from merely competent ones. They reached San Clemente Island 4 hours and 37 minutes after entering the water, soaked and cold but functioning as a unit. The immediate transition to the running phase tested their ability to shift between different types of physical stress while managing fatigue and environmental factors. The island run was brutal. 15 miles of uneven terrain, steep climbs, and loose rock that made every step uncertain. Sarah's lightweight build became an advantage on the technical sections, where her balance and agility allowed her to maintain pace over difficult ground, but the real test came at mile 10, when Thompson twisted his ankle on a hidden rock. For several minutes, it looked like the challenge might end before they reached the first checkpoint. Instead of stopping to assess the injury, Thompson gritted his teeth and continued, while the team adjusted their formation to provide support without slowing their overall pace. They completed the island portion in just under 6 hours, making them one of the fastest teams to ever attempt the opening sequence. But Sarah knew the real challenges were yet to come. Phase 2 began immediately. A series of technical rescue scenarios that required the team to extract simulated casualties from various dangerous situations. While operating on limited sleep and nutrition, they were given 4 hours of rest and basic rations before beginning 18 hours of continuous operations. The scenarios were designed to be physically demanding but also psychologically stressful, rescuing a victim from a collapsed building simulation, while smoke machines limited visibility and sound effects created disorientation. Extracting someone from a water tank while navigating underwater obstacles and time pressure. Each scenario built on the previous one, accumulating fatigue while requiring increasing precision and teamwork. By hour 30 of the challenge, Sarah was operating in a mental state she had never experienced before. Her body was functioning on autopilot, muscle memory and training taking over while her conscious mind dealt with problem-solving and communication. The team had developed an almost telepathic coordination, able to execute complex maneuvers with minimal verbal instruction. Thompson's injured ankle was clearly bothering him, but he never complained or asked for accommodation. Davis was showing signs of fatigue during swimming portions, but compensated by pushing harder during land-based challenges. Rodriguez had recovered from his early struggles and was performing consistently across all activities. Phase 3 introduced the element that had broken previous teams: extended operations with progressive sleep deprivation. Starting at hour 40, the team was allowed only 90 minutes of sleep every 12 hours, while continuing to face challenges that required full cognitive function and physical capability. Sarah discovered that sleep deprivation affected her differently than her teammates. While they became irritable and prone to communication errors, she seemed to enter a meditative state where external distractions faded and her focus became laser-sharp. This unexpected adaptation allowed her to take on navigation and timing responsibilities when the others were struggling with decision-making. During hour 55, while navigating a complex obstacle course in complete darkness, Rodriguez missed a crucial handrail and fell 15 feet into a safety net. He was physically uninjured but shaken by the mistake, the first serious error any team member had made during the challenge. "I'm compromising the team," he said during their brief rest period afterward. No, Sarah said firmly. You're human. We all are. The question is whether we support each other through mistakes or let them break us apart. Her words seemed to galvanize the group. They had been operating as individuals, trying not to let the team down. But Sarah's comment reminded them that they were stronger as a unit than as a collection of separate people trying to be perfect. Phase 4 began at hour 72. A 48-hour continuous operation that would determine whether they could break the standing record. No sleep, minimal nutrition, and challenges that required every skill. They had developed over 6 weeks of preparation. The centerpiece was a cross-country navigation challenge that covered more than 60 miles of varied terrain, including desert, mountains, and coastal areas. The team had to maintain an average pace while stopping at designated checkpoints to complete technical challenges, rope rescues, equipment repairs, medical simulations, and problem-solving exercises. By hour 90, Sarah felt like she was existing in an altered state of consciousness. Her body continued to function, but her perception of time and space became fluid. Hours passed like minutes, or minutes stretched into hours. The boundary between sleeping and waking blurred until she wasn't sure which state she was in at any given moment, but her teammates were experiencing the same disorientation. And their shared struggle created a bond stronger than friendship. They became extensions of each other, covering weaknesses and amplifying strengths without conscious thought. During hour 110, with less than 18 hours remaining, they faced the final major challenge, a technical rescue simulation that required them to extract multiple casualties from a burning building replica while managing limited oxygen, extreme heat, and structural instability. Sarah found herself taking point on the rescue, her smaller size allowing her to navigate tight spaces and reach victims that the larger men couldn't access. But the real test was coordinating the extraction, while everyone was operating on physical and mental reserves they didn't know they possessed when they emerged. From the simulation with all casualties successfully extracted, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer a civilian contractor who happened to be participating in a military challenge. She had become part of something larger than herself, connected to teammates who had trusted her. With their success and safety, our 120 arrived with the team, still functional and still moving toward the final checkpoint. They were exhausted beyond anything Sarah had ever imagined possible, but they were together and they were finishing what they had started. The final challenge was elegant in its simplicity, a 5-mile run to the beach where they had started 5 days earlier. No obstacles, no technical requirements, just the ability to cover ground as a team one more time. As they approached the finish line, Sarah could see Commander Harrison and the evaluation team waiting with stopwatches and cameras. She could also see other personnel who had gathered to witness what no one had expected. A team that included a civilian contractor completing one of the most demanding challenges in military training. They crossed the finish line together, exactly as they had started, as a team. Time, Harrison called out, checking his stopwatch. 126 hours, 18 minutes. Sarah felt the words hit her like a physical blow. They had not only completed Operation Ironman, they had broken a record that had stood for 10 years. By more than an hour. Sarah collapsed onto the sand, not from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming realization of what they had accomplished. Around her, her teammates were experiencing the same mixture of disbelief and triumph. 5 days earlier, they had been 4 individuals with different backgrounds and abilities. Now they were something entirely different, a team that had achieved what most people would consider impossible. Commander Harrison approached with medical personnel, who began conducting mandatory post-challenge health assessments. Sarah's vital signs were stable, her injuries limited to minor cuts and bruises, and her mental state surprisingly clear despite the extended sleep deprivation. "How do you feel?" the medic asked as he checked her pulse and blood pressure. "Like I could do it again," Sarah said, surprising herself with the truth of that statement. Harrison overheard her response and smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." As news of the record-breaking performance spread through the base, Sarah found herself at the center of attention she had never sought or expected. Personnel who had barely acknowledged her existence now approached with congratulations and questions about her background and training. Lieutenant Miller was among the first to reach her after the medical clearance. "Sarah, I have to ask," he said, grinning widely. "How long have you been hiding the fact that you're basically a superhuman?" "I wasn't hiding anything," Sarah replied honestly. 6 months ago, I was serving tables and worried about paying rent. I had no idea I was capable of anything like this. The truth was more complicated than that simple statement suggested. The physical capabilities had always been there, dormant but real. What she had discovered during the 6 weeks of preparation and 5 days of challenge was something different, the ability to transcend individual limitations through teamwork and shared purpose. Thompson, whose initial skepticism had transformed into genuine respect, sat down beside her on the sand. "You know this changes everything, right?" he said. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've just proven that the most elite training in the military can be mastered by someone with no military background," Thompson said. "That's either going to revolutionize how we think about personnel selection, or it's going to make a lot of people very uncomfortable." Sarah hadn't considered the broader implications of her participation and success. She had approached the challenge as a personal test, an opportunity to discover her own capabilities. But Thompson was right that the results raised questions about assumptions regarding who was qualified for elite military roles. Davis joined their conversation, still processing the magnitude of their achievement. The old record was set by Team Alpha 7, guys who had been training together for years and were considered the best of the best, he said. "We just beat them with a team that included someone who 6 months ago was working in food service." "Maybe that's why we beat them," Rodriguez said, settling onto the sand with the others. "We weren't trying to live up to anyone else's standard. We were creating our own." Commander Harrison approached the group with a serious expression. "I need to debrief with each of you individually over the next few days," he said. "But I want you to know that what you've accomplished here is going to have consequences beyond this base." He looked directly at Sarah. "Your participation and success in this challenge raises questions that go all the way up the chain of command. There are going to be people who want to study how this happened, others who want to replicate it, and probably some who want to pretend it didn't happen at all." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. "Sir, I never intended to create controversy. I just wanted to see what I was capable of." "That's exactly why this matters," Harrison said. "You approached this without preconceptions about what was possible or impossible. That mindset, combined with your natural capabilities and work ethic, produced results that challenge conventional wisdom about human performance." Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself navigating a new reality. Her administrative position remained officially unchanged, but everyone on the base treated her differently. She was invited to participate in training exercises, consulted on fitness program development, and asked to share her perspective on team dynamics and performance optimization. The Navy's interest in her achievement led to formal interviews with personnel psychologists, fitness experts, and training specialists. They wanted to understand how someone with her background had adapted to elite military challenges so successfully. "What we're seeing," one psychologist explained during a debriefing session, "is that your civilian background may have actually been an advantage. You didn't have preconceived notions about what you couldn't do, so you approached each challenge with genuine curiosity rather than limiting beliefs." Sarah also discovered that her success had implications beyond her own career. The Navy began reevaluating fitness standards and training methodologies, considering whether current programs were actually identifying and developing the best possible personnel. But the most significant change was personal. The woman who had arrived at the base 6 months earlier, focused solely on survival and supporting her brother's education, had been replaced by someone who understood her own capabilities and potential. She had discovered that limitations she had accepted were often self-imposed, and that extraordinary achievement was possible with the right combination of opportunity, preparation, and support. Her brother Marcus noticed the change during one of their weekly phone calls. "You sound different," he said. "More confident, I guess. Like you know something you didn't know before." "I do know something I didn't know before," Sarah said. "I know that I'm capable of more than I ever imagined." "What are you going to do with that knowledge?" Marcus asked. Sarah looked out her apartment window toward the base, where she could see SEALs conducting evening training exercises. "I'm not sure yet," she said, "but I'm excited to find out." Commander Harrison had mentioned that Sarah's achievement might lead to opportunities she had never considered. Special operations units were interested in her perspective on team dynamics. Training commands wanted her input on program development. Academic institutions were curious about her experience, bridging civilian and military performance standards, but Sarah realized that the most important outcome wasn't any specific opportunity. It was the discovery that extraordinary achievement was possible when individual capability was combined with shared purpose and mutual support. She had learned that teams could accomplish things that no individual could achieve alone, and that potential existed in places where no one thought to look for it. 6 months earlier, Sarah Martinez had been invisible, struggling to survive and support her family while dealing with grief and financial pressure. Today, she was the civilian contractor who had helped break a 10-year military record, challenging assumptions about human performance and proving that extraordinary capability could emerge from the most ordinary circumstances. The record would eventually be broken again by other teams with their own stories and capabilities. But Sarah's achievement would remain significant for what it represented: proof that potential exists everywhere, waiting for the right combination of opportunity, preparation, and courage to reveal itself. As she prepared for whatever came next, Sarah carried with her the knowledge that limitations are often illusions, that teamwork can transcend individual capability, and that extraordinary achievement is possible for anyone willing to discover what they're truly capable of accomplishing. She had started as someone they thought was just a civilian. She had become someone who redefined what civilian meant.